Good afternoon, Luang Por.
Good afternoon, Ajahn Sumedho.
Thank you for taking the time for another Q&A. Today is Sunday, the 9th of November, and today's topic is something that we sometimes refer to in Dhamma and practicing circles here in the West in particular as the inner tyrant, that inner critic and judge. You've addressed this topic before, you've mentioned it. Could you describe what it is and how to understand it, practice with it?
Well, with wisdom, as the Buddha pointed out, you're not what you think. You're not the body. But we identify, we're conditioned, programmed to identify with the body, which is a very unstable form in the universe. When you consider your own body, how subject it is to the weather or growing old, sickness, and so forth, the human body is not a real refuge for any of us. And then the human species is a thinking species. And you wisely examine thinking, thoughts, and you see that if you've got, they're created forms, they're not ultimate reality. Thoughts are based on good and bad, right and wrong. So this is a critical function. This is the inner tyrant, thinking, because you can always find something wrong with yourself as a man or a woman, because your identity is always with something imperfect, something changeable, something that changes according to conditions. And so people want to know who they are as some kind of permanent person, my real self, looking for my real self or reality itself, with the conditions that are basically delusions. So it's in realizing that the tyrant is a critical function, and some of us are born critics. For some reason, we take our thinking process very seriously, and that tyrant, or they call it the inner jackal, always screaming away at us because you see, you're not good enough, you're not perfect, you might be wrong, you might be misguided. Other people criticize me, and then the inner tyrant says, well, I wonder if that's true. And so you spend time trying to find out if you did something bad, or should you apologize or not apologize, and so, you can always see that you might have spoken out of turn or exaggerated something or been in a bad mood and yelled at somebody, and then, the inner critic, you should apologize for all the wrongs you've made in life. And in monastic life, with the Vinaya, we have to confession every fortnight, admitting that anything we said intentionally or unintentionally, we ask for forgiveness. And that it's quite interesting because that's part of our identity, is that we are what we think, what we say. We hold ourselves either as a good person or a bad person, or mediocre, brilliant person, a genius, a princess, a prince, and all like that. And this is all delusion. Like in my most deluded moments, I never saw myself as a prince or a princess. So I'm more the modest type that says, well, I'm just an ordinary guy, and I make mistakes, but my intentions are good, so I can rationalize my mistakes. So it's not so painful. But if I let the inner tyrant take over, they always go to the extreme. And once I had insight into the function of language, I began to understand that just by not being self-critical, by just trying to use the power of positive thinking all the time. I'm a good person. I'm gifted. I'm grateful. I'm content. I'm happy. And just by that, you get a kind of momentary relief. But then the inner tyrant will take over once something else, conditions change, and you lose it and get back into the jackal position where you're just stupid and no good and ugly and terrible person. So, whether you think you're the best or the worst is still the delusion. Being the worst or just an ordinary guy or the better than the rest it's all what we call sankhara. And as in the Paticca Samuppada, the dependent origination, sankhara affects consciousness. So we can't, what we think, it becomes conscious. And then we react to that according to what we call karma. But if you take the position of the witness, then you can see this for yourself. That what you think is very changeable. Thinking is very unstable. And just trying to believe in something, like believing in God as an absolute, when you don't really know, but you've been told that you go to hell if you don't, is the first commandment of the 10 Commandments, then you out of fear and what you've been told, out of your conditioning, and then you grasp that, and that's God is perfect, but I'm not. I'm a sinner, and you identify with the sinner. When ultimate reality, you're God. Now that might be a shocking statement, because most human beings easily align themselves with the sinner, being a sinner, and only extreme narcissistic sociopaths identify with being God as a person, because the person is not God. The person is Sumedho Bhikkhu, a so-called Bhikkhu. And this is, so Sumedho Bhikkhu is another condition. It's a word given to me when I was 31 years old, 32. So I wasn't always Sumedho Bhikkhu. I was Robert Jackman. That was given to me by my parents. I don't remember being told that, but I was baptized with that name, and I didn't choose it. It's not what I was born grasping. I'm Robert Jackman. I'm an American. This is information you acquired from your parents. So it's very important really to investigate, and this word investigate is the whole point of the Buddhist teaching. It's for investigations, not for grasping or just believing in what the Buddha says, but to find out for yourself. So I can think, I'm God, or I shouldn't think I'm God. That's overstating, that's assuming, that's sacrilegious, that's a sin. Or whether I think I'm God or a sinner, they're both illusions, because they're words. One is the best, the highest, the other is the worst. And the best and the highest are about phenomena, about words, about concepts. And this the inner critic will latch on to, so we're educated to criticize. Just listening to the news, you realize how critical everybody is. To disparage others or to disparage the opposite, to be racially biased or gender biased, form opinions about transgender or LGBTQ. We do that. We're oftentimes programmed to grasp those perceptions. But when you examine that with wisdom, you see that LGBTQ is it a sin? Or is it wrong? Is it perverted? Is it right? Is it a person? Then you get caught up in the inner critic. If you're very narrow-minded, then you think it's a sin, because in the Bible it's considered sinful. But is it sinful? Is it just perceived as sinful or right or wrong according to how you've been conditioned to think? So it's all an illusion. The world that we believe is real is not real at all. It's an unstable, changing world that we see here, smell, taste, touch, that we create with our thoughts, that we've been programmed since birth to grasp as concepts that we have no, influence over. When we're an innocent child, you just grasp what you're told. So then the liberals want to accept everything is equal. Which is just another way of thinking. Because is there equality among conditions? Are all conditions the same? And obviously not. Are all the conditions that I identify with are good or bad? Then we get into the inner tyrant, afraid of going to hell. That's fearsome. To be in a hell realm for eternity. What can be more frightening than that? Or to live with God in heaven forevermore sounds really blissful and happy. So we prefer to go to heaven where we'll be happy than burn in eternal fire. So that's, as a child, innocent child, you just believe what you're told. But hell and heaven are concepts. They're sankharas, they begin and end, they're made up words. And they have their equivalents in all the different languages. Because that's the function of language, to criticize. Say, this is better than that, this is black, this is white, this is a man, this is a woman. You want to fix everything with a label because you want the stability of things whose very nature are unstable, and it's an impossibility. So why do people take to drugs and drink, which is even more unstable? But sometimes there's a relief from the inner critic or the jackal who screams away at you. Like taking mind-changing drugs, the jackal shuts up for a while. And that's a relief. You might feel blissful for an hour or so. But then you realize that drug taking, you become addicted, which is sinful. You do degenerate things to buy drugs. You do things you know are wrong to get the right conditions to feel blissful for a few hours. And so you become a criminal or something that is antisocial or ends up in prison or dead. But when you take refuge in Dhamma, and this is a traditional Theravadan Buddhist approach. What is that? What are we taking refuge in a word? Is it we taking refuge in some idea of eternal goodness or righteousness? And then the translation for Dhamma is apparent here and now. And what is apparent here and now for every single human being is consciousness, because that's what they are. A dog or a pig, a chicken is experiencing consciousness. It's a form. Whether chickens have inner critics, I don't know. But human beings certainly do. And I certainly am an expert on this subject.
So as you pointed out, it's the inner critic really is a result of this thinking function.
Grasping thoughts.
Grasping thoughts. And then you mentioned investigation.
Without investigating.
But not just investigating thoughts, investigating non-thinking as well, is it? Or what's beyond thinking? What is that?
Well, you find out for yourself.
How do you go about investigating that? Say for someone who's caught up in this kind of inner critic, the inner jackal, as you call it, because it can feel like being persecuted by one's own negative thinking.
Well, like thinking is a gift or a curse, as the jackal makes it into a curse. And positive thinking is heaven, a gift. But then you can become a goody two-shoes by just think, life is wonderful and I live happy. Because that's not life, that's not investigation. Consciousness doesn't have a name. We call it consciousness, we call it Dhamma.
So what is investigation then?
Investigation is to see the impermanence of phenomena, whether it's emotions, thoughts, views and opinions, because they all are impermanent. I mean, you can actually see that for yourself. Try to find a condition that's permanent.
Because sometimes people do say this inner critic never shuts up. It feels like it's not impermanent. It feels like it's always there, harrowing you. And
that's the way it seems because you don't want it. You know, we're trying to get rid of the inner critic as an attachment to it. You can become obsessed with controlling, trying to control your mind. But the mind isn't controllable. And you can change the subject, but power of positive thinking, you can change from negative thinking to positive thinking, but it's still thinking. So that's why I encourage this investigation, the space between thoughts, which we never notice. Or if it is like silence and you're talking to somebody and suddenly you're both silent, you can feel very restless, like you've got to fill up the silence with something. You've got to say something funny or something interesting, or get caught up with blaming somebody. So there's a lot to blame in life. And we can always find some external thing to blame for my suffering. But that's where the investigation is, who's suffering? Who suffers? And then that very word who leaves the thinking mind, stops the thinking mind, because you know who's suffering. And then there's silence. And then you try to, out of habit, try to blame somebody. It's the way I was brought up. I didn't have a chance in life. It's the society. It's men or it's women. It's my wife or my husband, my children. My beloved dog died. It's God's fault. So the mind can always blame, but you're not interested in blaming, because anyone can do that, but you can investigate the silence. Who thinks? Who am I? Or just the word who. My thinking mind stops.
It doesn't say me?
It takes a while to, now I've become quite skillful at this. So, in terms of ultimate truth, there's no suffering. Dhamma doesn't suffer. Taking refuge in non-suffering. Dhamma is here and now. It's not, and what is apparent here and now which every single human being can do, is realize it's like this. It's the way it is. It's being before you become. If I become Ajahn Sumedho, then I have to endure the problems of that karmic condition has. It's karma, being Ajahn Sumedho. But who is Ajahn Sumedho? And, I know the answer to that on the worldly level. It's me. But in terms of Dhamma, apparent here and now, there's no me. There's consciousness. You don't become a zombie. You don't drop dead. But you begin to recognize the silence behind the sounds of the world. The world is a very noisy, confused place to live in. So it's when we cling to the world, we suffer. And that's a fact. But awareness here and now, that is reality. It's silent. There's no language. Languages are very limited. Trying to describe ultimate reality or Dhamma, it's better than the best. It's the bestest of the bestest. You can go into total absurdity with English superlatives, and it still doesn't work. It's not about best or worst. It's about here and now. And when you let go of your false identities, what's left is bliss, silence, apparent here and now, being conscious here and now. And you cultivate that. That's insight into the path. Stream entry is when you actually realize that for yourself and not just think you got it through the intellect. The intellect you can't trust, no matter how brilliant you might be, with an IQ way beyond anyone else. It could be a curse because you're so skilled at thinking. Like it's interesting with AI technology and robots. You can program a robot to think better than any of us. And that's what they're scared of, that they're going to be smarter than the smartest human being. And because we treasure the intellect as a great gift. But you can have brain damage and still be conscious. So that's, consciousness isn't about being intelligent. It's about wisdom. Apparent here and now is this. No, I don't think robots can be programmed for that. Because most human beings don't get it at all. And there's no program for it. So it's letting go of all programs, all ideas, all views and opinions. Learning to be here and now, just be. The consciousness itself is peaceful. It's true peace, inner peace, outer peace.
Which puts the inner tyrant, the inner jackal into perspectives as just something that arises and ceases.
Well, the inner jackal doesn't like it. You know, it'll go on saying, are you sure? You know, creating doubt. And aren't you kind of being misleading? You know, the world is our reality. The world we see, hear, smell, taste, that's the real world. And that's our reality. So as long as you believe that. But is it? It seems real because we've been conditioned to believe in it as our reality. Believe I'm this person 24/7. When I'm asleep, I'm Ajahn Sumedho. When I'm awake, I'm Ajahn Sumedho. When I'm sick, when I'm healthy. Well, because that's convention. So somebody comes and says, I'd like to see Ajahn Sumedho, and you say, well, he's asleep. Am I dead? Or just conscious at rest? So it's getting to know your true self. What are you? And you identify with the body and your conditioning, then it's hopeless. You can meditate as a person for 70, 80, 90 years and still not get it, as long as you operate from I'm meditating, I am a meditator. And I'm going to practice meditation. And then really serious meditators feel guilty when they're not meditating. I shouldn't be fooling off like this, reading novels or watching news programs. I should be meditating, because I've heard that you've got to meditate all the time. That's what my inner tyrant always would say. It's that story I like to tell you about when I first ordained. And I was at Wapapo. I kept having this recurrent dream, and that I was sitting in a cafe drinking coffee with a pastry, and then the inner jackal say, "You're wasting your time. You should be studying for the exam." And I had this reoccurring dream many times. I think it's trying to tell me something. And then the inner tyrant says, you should be meditating all the time. You should be mindful all the time. And I caught you a few hours ago being not mindful, being frivolous. That's the inner tyrant. And then one day I had that dream and I woke up and I realized what it was saying. There is no exam. And I've been operating. And there is no enlightenment for Ajahn Sumedho or Robert Jackman or Soko Bhikkhu. Because you're already enlightened when you realize your true nature is pure conscious awareness, being here and now, apparent here and now, and timeless. That's a fact. It's not just a belief. But at first, when I first had that insight, I didn't want to believe it. My inner critic wouldn't let me. It's too simple. It's, when you read the scriptures about how the earth shook and all the devas rejoiced in the heavens, that's not what happens. At least not to me.
No.
But suddenly I realized through investigation, through cultivating silence, the sound of silence. Silence doesn't have a sound, but it's silence is like this. The space between words, between thoughts, before the thought and after the thought. Emotions arise in the silence. Love and hate, anger, jealousy, fear arise in the silence. But the silence isn't frightened or jealous or angry. So silence doesn't get angry, doesn't get lustful, doesn't get frightened, isn't jealous. But these emotions can arise in the silence, and when we give attention to the condition, grasp it or try to reject it, identified with it, or say, no, I'm not that. Whatever you do to it, just be the silence, the silent witness.
Thank you very much, Luang Por.